It's not a competition, but if it were, I'd be winning. That's what she said. Cool, measured, slicing the air between us while reaching for a second glass of Pinot. The guests laughed, a few a little too hard, a few looking over awkwardly to see how I'd take it. I didn't laugh. I just sat there, still holding the corkscrew, wine bottle unopened because I'd forgotten the Syrah she asked for. My mistake, apparently. But the way she leaned back with that satisfied little smirk, soaking up the reaction, that's what made it click. She wasn't joking. She never had been. That moment didn't just sting. It opened a door I hadn't wanted to admit was there, one I'd kept locked under rationalizations, stress, ambition, her way of joking. All the lines I used to excuse away the slow erosion of us. Because if I was honest, this wasn't new. It had just stopped being ignorable. Earlier that night, while getting ready, she'd asked if I was going to wear that shirt again. I changed. Not because I agreed, but because I didn't want another pre-party debate. At the last one, she introduced me as a wanderer in search of a map, like I was some charismatic vagrant instead of a man who'd stepped away from corporate burnout to start something that actually mattered to him. The room laughed then, too, just like they always did, and I smiled, small, polite, controlled, because challenging her in public only fed the narrative. But that night, I felt the shift. Something in me stopped apologizing. I watched her tilt her head as the conversation moved on, still basking in her own performance. She looked the way she always did in front of an audience, alert, sculpted, full of curated self-assurance. Her words always landed, her charm always polished, and I realized I'd been standing on the wrong stage this whole time. The drive home was silent, which she didn't seem to mind. She tapped through notifications on her phone while I stared ahead, every red light stretching longer than it should have. When we pulled into the driveway, she grabbed her bag and said she was going to bed early yoga tomorrow. No kiss goodnight. No goodnight at all. I sat in the car a moment longer, engine off, fingers still on the steering wheel. If it was a contest, fine. I wasn't playing anymore, but I was going to win. It wasn't just the dinner party. Once I stopped brushing past things, I started seeing it everywhere. The way she treated our marriage like a resume line. Something to reference when convenient, downplay when not. A few days after the party, we went to a mutual friend's housewarming. She stood beside me with a glass of Prosecco, arm linked through mine, as she told a group of new acquaintances that I was taking time to find his next step. It's very reflective of him. Her voice was sugar-coated, almost admiring on the surface, but I could feel the subtext grip around my throat like a slow, tightening hand. One of the women smiled politely and said, "Oh, that's brave," and I had to resist the urge to laugh, not at her, but at the whole charade. Brave, sure, as long as someone else footed the emotional bill while she played the enlightened partner. At home, her tone was different. "You could be doing more," she said one night while scrolling her phone on the couch. "There's a window for relevance in your industry. Don't let it close on you." I asked if she wanted to talk about what was really bothering her. She shrugged, said she was just being honest. "Honesty," I replied, "doesn't always have to come gift-wrapped in contempt." She blinked at that. For a second, the air stilled. Then she laughed, sharp, disbelieving, and turned her attention back to her screen. Conversation over. I started keeping a mental tally, not out of bitterness, but strategy. If she wanted to keep score, I would too. Not the petty kind. The kind that measured tone, motive, pattern. The breakthrough came 2 weeks later. A friend of mine, not hers, mine, forwarded me a screenshot. No preamble, just a brief message. "Thought you should see this." It was from a group chat. A thread of messages from her and her inner circle. One line hit first. "He's mediocre in every way but still thinks he's a partner." Then another from her. "Honestly keeping him around to make the exit more dramatic." It was like a trapdoor opened beneath my feet. She wasn't just competing. She was rehearsing. All the backhanded compliments. The public smiling, private sneering. The calculated storytelling in front of her friends, at work events, on social media. She'd been building something. Not a marriage, but a performance arc. And I was the prop she intended to discard for applause. I stared at the screen for a long time. Not angry. Not sad. Just still. Because in that moment, I knew exactly what I was dealing with. She wasn't confused. She wasn't overwhelmed or drifting. She was orchestrating an exit. And now, I was going to orchestrate one too. After the screenshot, I didn't confront her. That would have given her something to control, An argument to steer, a narrative to reframe. I wasn't interested in giving her that. What I wanted was clarity, and what I needed was leverage. So I waited, observed, watched her like a director studies an actor who doesn't know they're still on camera. She'd been quieter lately, not in a withdrawn way, but like someone rehearsing lines in her head. She started booking weekend retreats without telling me until the day before. Always called them clarity weekends or soul resets. The language was so polished it almost sounded like it came from a brochure. Once I asked where she was going and she said, "Just somewhere to breathe." No follow-up, no invitation, not even a fake one. When I mentioned we hadn't spent a weekend together in over a month, she smiled and said, "That's why we're still civil." Then there were the introductions. At a recent networking mixer, she gestured toward me while speaking to a colleague and said, "This is my husband. He's trying to find his path right now." Said it kindly, like it was noble, but I watched the flicker of amusement in her colleague's eyes, and I knew what she'd really done. It was always the same script. She was ascending, I was drifting. She was pursuing clarity, I was blocking sunlight. But the moment that cemented everything, the one that made my spine go cold, came late one evening. She'd fallen asleep with her laptop open on the couch. I wasn't snooping. I was picking up after her like I always did. Then I saw the email. Subject line: Speaking opportunity, life after small men. At first, I thought it was a spam ad. But then I saw the sender's name, a woman she'd recently met at a wellness panel. I opened the thread. It wasn't spam. It was an invitation to speak on a panel about transforming life after minimizing relationships. And she'd replied, "I'd love to. Timing couldn't be better." I closed the laptop slowly. It wasn't just that she was planning to leave. It was that she needed me to be small on the way out, to justify her expansion, to validate her new chapter. She wasn't trying to end a marriage. She was building a brand. And somewhere in her mind, she thought I wouldn't notice, or wouldn't respond. She was wrong on both counts. After that email, the rest came into focus like puzzle pieces snapping into place. I began checking the shared laptop when she wasn't around. Not often, just enough. I wasn't looking for answers or some question I hadn't asked aloud. I already knew the truth, just not the scale. What I found was colder than that. Calculated. Curated. She'd created a folder on her desktop labeled Growth Messaging. Inside were drafts. Dozens of them. Instagram captions. Medium post outlines. Bullet point speech ideas with titles like Reclaiming Your Narrative and The Art of Leaving with Grace. Most of them sounded like the kind of soft-lit affirmations you'd see under a filtered sunset. But one folder hit harder than the rest. It was called Exit Drafts. That's where I found them. The posts she hadn't published yet but clearly intended to. All pre-written for the day she made her exit official. Leaving with love. Choosing growth over comfort. No blame, just clarity. Each one read like a curtain call, the kind people applaud for even if they missed the show. She was already staging her legacy. The brave woman who walked away from a stagnant marriage to become her fullest self. What struck me wasn't the malice. There wasn't any. That would have been easier. No, what made it chilling was the total absence of me. Not the man. Not the marriage. Just a backdrop of vague unhappiness she could position herself against like a fresh canvas. She was leaving a structure she no longer needed, and I was just another column to knock down on the way out. I didn't react. I didn't breathe a word. Instead, I began planning. I moved my business finances to a separate account, quietly. I spoke to a property attorney about the house, which was under both names but paid for mostly by mine. I started keeping receipts, financial, emotional, strategic. I wasn't going to burn down the stage. I was going to exit it before she could start the final act. One night, while she was packing for yet another solo retreat, she asked if I could send her a few good photos of us from earlier years. She said she wanted to reflect, maybe make a gratitude post about our journey. I smiled, said sure. Then I went to the bedroom and sat in the dark for a long time, staring at nothing. She wasn't leaving to heal. She was leaving to be seen. But if she wanted a story where she got to be the one walking away, calm, poised, righteous, she was going to need to rewrite it. Because I'd already started walking. She came back from her latest clarity retreat with a new necklace and a stronger sense of detachment. The necklace was a slim gold bar with the word becoming engraved on it. She wore it like armor, like proof that she was evolving while the rest of us stagnated. She unpacked slowly, humming to herself, while I sat at the kitchen table pretending to review invoices on my laptop. She didn't ask how my weekend had been, didn't ask what I'd eaten, who I'd seen, what I'd thought about while she was gone. She didn't need me to have a story. She just needed me to hold a place in hers. That evening, after she fell asleep, lavender oil still clinging to the air around the bed, I opened her laptop one more time. The folder had been renamed. Now it was labeled Next Chapter Assets. Inside were new additions, short videos she'd filmed during her trip, filtered clips of her journaling in front of a fireplace, walking on a trail, smiling faintly into the wind. The captions were already written. This is what reclaiming looks like. Unapologetically moving forward. Leaving isn't failure. It's flight. I scrolled through her drafts in silence. They were beautiful, in a way, perfectly lit, perfectly framed, perfectly hollow. But one post stopped me cold. It was an unpublished caption under a filtered selfie taken by a lake. He stayed the same. I had no choice but to grow. That's when I knew. She wasn't just walking away from the marriage. She was building a monument on top of it. I wasn't going to be mourned or missed. I was going to be used. The next morning, she was in the living room stretching before yoga when I told her I'd be out of town for a few days. For what? She asked, not looking up. Perspective, I said. She smiled slightly, approving. That's healthy. I nodded, my face neutral. She didn't ask where I was going. She didn't offer a hug. She just went back to stretching, whispering affirmations to herself like no one else was in the room. And maybe, in her mind, no one was. But I was. And I was done rehearsing my part in her show. She came home from yoga to an apartment that had gone quiet in the wrong way. The kind of quiet that doesn't greet you, it informs you. She stepped in with her mat slung over one shoulder, her hair still damp, scrolling through her notifications like usual. She didn't even look up at first, just walked into the entryway, kicked off her shoes, and called out a flat, "Hey!" No response. That's when she looked up. The coat rack was empty. Not just my jacket, all of them. The bookshelf near the door, the one I kept my keys and headphones on, bare. The tray by the kitchen sink where I tossed my wallet and watch every night, gone. She paused, called out again, louder this time. Still no answer. She walked through the apartment like someone retracing steps in a dream they didn't remember starting. The closet, half cleared. The drawers, mine emptied. Bathroom counter, missing my razor, my cologne, the towel I never folded right. All gone. She stood there, disoriented, but not devastated. That would have required something she'd already spent. She found the letter taped to the inside of the fridge door. Not dramatic, just efficient. It was short. No blame. No storytelling. No window left open. I'd removed my name from the lease 3 days prior. Changed my phone number the morning she left for class. I cancelled the joint storage unit. Moved my business mailing address. Not a single step taken in anger, just subtraction. I didn't leave to create a spectacle. I left to close the curtain. She texted first. Nothing emotional. Just a question. Where are you? The message bounced. Number not recognized. She emailed next. We should talk. No reply. She checked the drafts folder. Her exit posts. Still there. Still untouched. But they didn't work anymore. Not now. She didn't get to be the one who left first. And now, she didn't even know how to explain what happened. There's a particular kind of silence that follows the removal of a structure. It doesn't roar. It lingers. She wasn't devastated. That much I'd expected. But she was disoriented. And for someone who'd always run ahead of the narrative, not knowing where I'd gone, or why she couldn't trace me, was its own kind of collapse. Her captions didn't fit anymore. I watched from a distance, quietly, as the performance faltered. She didn't post for days. Then she posted a photo of the lake from her last retreat. No person, no caption. Just an image. It didn't land the way her other posts did. The comments were scattered. A few heart emojis. A few "Hope you're well" messages from people too polite to ask directly what was going on. She tried again, this time a vague reflection about transitions and making space for new chapters. But without a named exit, the post felt unanchored. She couldn't cast herself as the woman who chose to walk, because she hadn't, and she knew it. Meanwhile, I stayed silent, not to punish her. I didn't need to. The absence did the work for me. One of our mutual friends reached out. A different one. Someone who hadn't taken sides yet. Hey, just checking in. Heard there's been movement, I replied politely. Everything's being handled. No animosity. He paused, then asked the question I knew would eventually come. Did you leave her? I kept my answer simple. I stopped participating. There was nothing more to explain. She had tried to direct the exit, to time it, frame it, and own the applause. But she misunderstood something critical. When someone steps off stage without warning, the spotlight doesn't know where to go. It stutters. It glares on an empty space. And the silence that follows isn't respectful, it's uncertain, uncomfortable. She had wanted a clean ending, a powerful departure. What she got was confusion. I had given her nothing she could script, no story she could center herself in. And in that absence, something she'd never prepared for crept in. Irrelevance. I didn't disappear, not really. I just stopped being reachable through the channels she controlled. No joint accounts, no shared digital calendars, no address she could use as a placeholder. I let the life we shared collapse without protest, quietly, systematically, like pulling pins from a tent until the whole thing folds in on itself. The thing she hadn't expected, I realized, was to be left without a story. Not a heartbreak narrative, not a betrayal saga, just subtraction. When she reached out to one of our older mutual friends, the kind who didn't use phrases like soul alignment or growth journey, he called me directly. I'm only calling once, he said. Just want to know you're okay. I told him I was. He hesitated. Then, she said you just vanished? I let that sit for a moment, then said, no. I just stopped explaining myself. He sighed, a slow exhale like someone realizing they'd suspected the truth all along. That tracks. I appreciated that. The silence we shared after said more than any commentary. Meanwhile, she tried to regain traction. She posted an old photo of us. Not a flattering one. Grainy. Low-lit. Captioned with something vague. Some chapters end before you know the plot. It was her attempt, I think, to bait speculation, to reassert herself as the one reacting to something beyond her control. Comments poured in, mostly from people outside our orbit. Strangers who read vulnerability into vagueness. But the people who mattered didn't engage. I didn't either. Because I wasn't going to validate a version of the story I never got to write. She didn't know where I was. She didn't know how to label what had happened. And for someone who curated every detail of her image, that undefined space, that unclaimed silence, was unbearable. I hadn't ghosted her. I'd ghosted the narrative. I'd become the part of the story she couldn't caption. And in her world, that was the deepest kind of loss. She stopped trying to contact me directly. But the messages kept coming, in the form of curated ambiguity. A photo of a new apartment. Caption. Fresh air. New light. A quote overlaid on a sunrise. Sometimes we outgrow the soil we were planted in. It wasn't for her friends. It wasn't even for herself. It was for me, the only audience she no longer had. The brilliance of subtraction is that it denies reaction. And that was all she ever really fed on, response. Even in conflict, she knew how to win by redirecting focus. But now, with no reply to bounce off of, her echo chamber started collapsing inward. One day, I got an email from her work account. Brief, cold, administrative. Please confirm your mailing address for official paperwork. That was it. No greeting. No sign-off. Just the beginning of the practical unraveling. I responded. Not from my main email, but the one I'd created for transitional logistics. I gave her the P.O. box. Nothing more. I could feel the frustration embedded in her next move. 2 days later, she posted a carousel of smiling photos with friends, tagged with inspirational hashtags. But the caption was a crack in the armor. Surround yourself with people who see you, not love you, not understand you. See you? Because that had always been the real need, to be visible, to be confirmed in her image. And I had stopped doing that the moment I left without a performance. I knew she wanted closure, but not the real kind. She wanted a final act, a mutual statement, a scene she could co-direct. But I'd left her with something worse than heartbreak. Ambiguity. The kind that can't be shaped into a narrative. The kind that doesn't sell. In public, she kept posting strength. In private, I imagine, she was scrolling through her own drafts, trying to revise the ending without the main character's participation. But I wasn't coming back for the rewrite. I'd already turned the page. Weeks passed, then months. Life without her was quiet, not peaceful yet, but clean. like walking through a house stripped to its studs. You still remembered where the furniture had been, but there was air now. You could breathe without stumbling into something staged. The legal correspondence arrived slowly, clean, procedural, efficient. I responded when needed. No flourishes, no commentary. Her lawyer's tone was predictably polished, but beneath the structure I could feel it, that twitch in the language where narrative usually went. But I didn't fill in the blanks. I didn't respond to the questions not asked. I didn't explain. At one point I heard from her sister. A surprise text. Simple. Not asking for gossip. Just want to know if you're okay. I told her I was. That was true. I wasn't healed, but I was steady. She replied. I thought you should know. She's been telling people you were distant for a long time. That you pulled away emotionally. I stared at the screen for a long time before answering. I was quiet. I wrote. That's not the same. She didn't reply. But I knew the message had landed. The worst part of this wasn't the betrayal. It was that she'd mistaken silence for emptiness. As if because I didn't argue, I didn't feel. As if every restraint I showed wasn't a decision, but a deficiency. But the truth is, silence is just what happens when you've already said everything and someone's still performing. And eventually, I stopped waiting for the curtain call. She, meanwhile, kept posting. Always framed in affirmation. Always filtered in just enough vulnerability to pass as strength. But I saw the changes. Fewer likes, more generic comments, the energy of an audience unsure how to clap for something they didn't understand. She had built a platform on certainty, on being the one with the story. Now, she was speaking into a space where even her echoes didn't sound like applause, because I wasn't there to listen anymore. And the story only worked when I stayed on script. By spring, the silence had deepened into something permanent. She stopped posting for a while. The captions dried up, the carefully curated light gave way to stock quotes and recycled reflections. It was like watching someone try to maintain a conversation after the audience had left the room. I didn't celebrate that. It wasn't a victory. But it was closure, not the dramatic kind, not the cinematic scene she'd wanted, just the absence of noise where there used to be performance dressed as healing. Then, one day, she broke the pattern. A letter arrived. Real envelope. Handwritten. No return address. I opened it slowly. Not out of curiosity, but preparation. Inside was one page. I thought I had to leave to grow. I didn't realize how much I was erasing in the process. No apology. No ownership. Just that. A single sentence, as if she was trying to reach out without risking anything. Still shaping the narrative. Still avoiding the weight of what she'd done. I folded it back into the envelope, placed it in the drawer where I kept the last few things I hadn't decided to keep or let go. It stayed there, unanswered. Because what she wanted wasn't forgiveness, it was narrative recovery. And I wasn't giving her one. Not because I was bitter, but because survival isn't a performance, it's a boundary. I moved into a new apartment that month. Smaller, quieter, mine. No shared closet. No curated spaces. Just clean lines and full ownership of everything inside. Sometimes at night, I'd hear a certain song, one she used to play when she cooked, back when things still felt like partnership. I wouldn't skip it. I'd let it play. Not because I missed her, but because memories don't disappear, they just stop giving orders. And when I looked at myself in the mirror, I didn't see someone who'd been left. I saw someone who'd walked out of a story that wasn't his anymore, and never truly had been.